So my name is Bob Steele. I'm from Tucson, Arizona. My home base is Carmel, California. I've been in real estate a long, long time, 50, 60 years, I guess. Okay. Oh, all right.
We are rolling.
Oh,
So
we are
you want me to ask you
rolling.
it
Okay.
again?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. In your words, what's the difference between creative real estate and more standard forms of brokering?
Well, for instance, in standard brokerage, you take a listing and has a price, and they agree on it, and it's going to be a money deal. And so we can bring a cash offer of some sort, and we negotiate it with the owner. But if you're doing strictly a creative real estate transaction in which I'm trying to solve something that you're trying to do with your life. In other words, you're a young person with a couple of children, you want to increase your life, but you've got a piece of property, you want to trade it or sell it so you get some money and buy something else with it, a bigger property. So we say, why not just see if we can't trade what you have instead of going through money? Why don't we list it where we trade your property for the bigger property? That way you don't have to go through the cash and you eliminate or don't eliminate, but you don't have to pay your taxes at this point in time. So you're able to reinvest the tax money that you would have spent. So let's do this, let's list your property, but we don't know what's coming up on the other side. So why don't we list your price unpriced? It'll be an unpriced listing. Now you're not going to get that in the normal real estate venue because the title company or the multiple listing service wouldn't even know how to list them. But if we list it for any price agreeable to you, and now it depends upon, perhaps you'll add your talent to it, you go into a motel, something of that ilk, so that there's different ways to do it. So we don't know what the price might come out at. So let's list it unpriced, and we'll take it into the marketplace and see if we can find you a match that makes it work for you. So that's equity marketing. That's not regular conventional marketing.
All right. And so what are some of the benefits of exchanging? You mentioned taxes, but I'm sure there are others.
Well, taxes and the fact that you can create your wealth by creating notes on. If you agree to work in my garden next week for a certain sum of money, and you're trading me your gardening services, the same thing I can do here. I can take your real estate, I can create a trust deed against it, trade the piece of paper, the trust deed, and buy another property. So you can keep your property if you want and buy another one by creating a trust deed on it and trading me the trust deed. Or options. You can put a blanket mortgage over your real estate and this real estate. The benefit of the blanket mortgage, you're putting up your equity for the deposit in this other real estate. And you may add some money with it or whatever it does necessary to solve this person's problem. But with a blanket mortgage, we can say that after you've made me the payment for 3 years, you release my original property from the blanket mortgage. So I only used it up for 3 years and then it's back again. So you don't have the mortgage, half of the mortgage disappears. You've proven that you make your payments. I'm happy with it. Your payments all swing over now to the new building. That's entirely, you can't do that in normal real estate.
So what got you into exchanging, and why did you continue to utilize exchanging?
I think I was fascinated with first of all, I read the 1031 coming up, and I saw that, I thought that was going to be a very important thing 50 years from now. So it's true, it is. So that's kind of got me into the thinking exchanging. And once I got into it, I found that it was people-oriented, and that was something I liked much better than the real estate part. It was just, what you're trying to do is important to me, and I'm trying to solve it for you. So I'm more working with you than I am your property. Mostly my real estate life began when I heard about a fellow named Dick Reno that was teaching exchanging. Because the 1031 law had just gone into effect, I felt it was something of the future. So I found out where he was teaching, and I took one of his classes. The classes were 6 days, and it was in depth. And I was fascinated because it was based on the fact that the real estate's inanimate, and it's the people that counted. So he had phrases that were still ring true to this day. You can't dance with a ranch. You can't take an apartment house to lunch. It's the people that count. So the real estate becomes secondary to the transaction because people think that it's real estate that's taking care of them, but it's really kind of the other way around. That the real estate is just a vehicle to get the people to where they want to go. So it's totally a different approach. So I used the formulas and I studied them like crazy. And I went back and took his class in about 6 months later. And somebody in my life told me that retention was only 20%. So I ended up taking Dick's class 5 times, 6 days each time. And I'd go back and work in the field for about 6 months. And at the end of that period of time, I knew just about everything that Dick Reno knew about exchanging. And so it turned into my entire life. I taught my kids education and how to use it by using formulas, strategies that were different. And then I would find that a broker from Colorado might come up with an idea, and somebody was using the same idea as some broker from Texas. So I started to realize that there was a pattern here of brokers discovering new and different ways to do business that wasn't just based on dollars, but based on motivations of people. So I started to catalog these items, and one person would do something, another would do it someplace else, and pretty soon I could see that, hey, this guy was doing the same thing as somebody else, but there was no continuity to it. People didn't realize that they could learn this. So I started building short, small books, and then I went to Dick and said, what about me teaching this as a supplement class to yours? And so we worked it out. I had a 3-day formula class in which we garnered up about 100 of these different formulas and found that it was unbelievable the way that you could take a formula and use it on one item, and a broker would use the same strategy in Alaska in entirely a different way. So it just became fascinating that you could put this information out and things could get started. So, for instance, we take one of them was a client came to me that had was growing tomatoes in Sacramento. So we decided that, hey, because this broker in Texas had used the futures on a stock transaction, traded some futures in the stock for real estate, why couldn't we trade some futures on the real estate part? So on a farmer. So we said, well, why not? So we ended up with that client, and we traded, I'm almost sure, it's in my book, $2 million worth of tomatoes to be delivered over, I think it was 5 years. And they delivered, what was it, $400,000 worth of tomatoes each year for 5 years. So all of a sudden, we had taken the future crops that hadn't been grown yet, and it fitted what Dick Reno called, which is a number 2 formula in my book, called the creation of wealth. So this farmer created wealth, hadn't grown the tomatoes yet. We traded the $2 million worth of tomatoes that had not been grown. but it was tied up legally and so forth, and had an established business. So all of a sudden you realize the whole futures market opens up an entirely different avenue. They could trade a rental unit for use 2 years from now. It's wealth that hasn't been discovered yet. So it just opens a magnitude of opportunities. So that's the way the book started.
And is there a type of person or broker that's attracted to exchanging?
I've done a lot of study in this area through a Dr. Parnes and a Dr. Osborne that wrote creative real estate techniques and so forth. And they've proven different things. They can prove, for number one, that women can be more creative than men, for instance. But they also proved, beyond any doubt, that creativity could be learned by anyone at any age. So it has nothing to do with age, or it has nothing to do with your acumen, it has nothing to do with your education. And they proved that with their brainstorming tests they ran. And they ran thousands of tests. But they would run it where it was exclusively with MBAs. Then they would exclusively with janitors. And then they mixed. And they found that the mix was actually better because you had this diversification of minds that came into play. So in a brainstorm, you're better off to be diversified because what comes out of your mind will trigger a thought from your mind from another one. So the more diversified your group is, the better it is for exchanging and for any kind of creative work, not just exchanging.
In the exchanging niche of real estate, do you feel like there's more teamwork or camaraderie involved than normal?
No question about it. No question about it. You, I don't know, there's a certain amount of respect or something that comes from it. When you go into a room, and I'll tell you some examples of this, so simple, that if Blake goes into a room, okay, Blake's known because of exchanging. People want to do business with him. All of a sudden the barrier is down because he performs. You know he performs. So that camaraderie that you're talking about is a professional camaraderie more than a personal. So you can take, and I know this for a fact, the people that your friends and so forth that you have now, they're not the best people to do deals with. The ones you want to do deals with are the ones that you've already met professionally. You know them, and they're the ones that you want to deal with. And so that's not it's not a trust or something, but it is. It's you believe in them, and anybody can blow it, any one of us, and we understand that. If I make a deal with you and it goes sour, I'm not going to blame you on this one. We'll go again on the next one, because I know your integrity and where you're coming from. So we do it repetitively. So we meet not once, but we meet 2, 3, 5, 10 times a year, someplace in the world where we're doing business or we're phone. And we do it, you learn so that you can make the deal on the phone. You don't even need the writing. If I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, okay? And so it's kind of like the old handshake, but on a very modern professional level.
Could exchanging work in a purely digital world?
In a purely digital world?
Like without meeting, without knowing the people?
Yes, and it's much easier than it used to be, particularly in the international when you had to wait 2 hours to get to a telephone or didn't have any telephone to work with. But yeah, there's no question that it's so much easier because, and I don't have to know Colorado Springs. When I was talking to Blake, I could call up and say, how's my overhead? Colorado Springs, because I have an office there if I ever wanted it, okay? And that's true all over the world. And so my children grew up with the children of these same people. They know each other to this day. They've traveled around the world together. It's a different life. It's a wonderful life. And it's going to get more so because now it's becoming more international. And you tend not to bomb somebody if you like them, right? If you do business with them. So the more that we cross these barriers, the more, I can call up Panama and get anything done I want down there, some other place, because I know people, and those people will do things. So it's a real interesting way. It's not doing the house in the neighborhood. It's all of a sudden it was the state and the country, and now it's the world. So it's a fascinating thing. If you want to travel, you can live any place in the world you want to live. You can any place you want to go. You can be in business in no time. So
You wrote a book called 300 Ways to Buy, Sell, and Trade Real Estate. If you want
There
to,
he
you can
is.
hold it
There's
up.
your famous book, Bob.
You can hold it up. Look at that. And could you just introduce some of the concepts you talk about in the book, just in general, and then I have further questions.
well, you can take in this book is you just open a page and pick one and you go in 100 different directions. I just mentioned the one on the agriculture where you're trading a futures crop. Let's bring it to the new.
Or let me stop you real quick. Sorry, I want to hear about all this, but just real quick, what exactly is a formula?
Formula synonym would be a strategy. It's the core premise that moves a transaction. One formula would be cash buying a house. That's one strategy, okay? The other strategy would be a personal note for the down payment into your house. We finance your house and you take out 75% in cash and you have my 25% note. And I use no money to do it. Now, we have trouble with the lender on that because he always thinks, well, it's no good and so forth. So you may have to carry that note, sell the note, and different things. But that's the concept. There's where you want to go, and then we build a strategy or a formula to get you where you want to go. The formula is the core. But what you personally know, makes the core change. It's not cut in concrete. It's not in concrete at all. So we talked about the agriculture a minute ago. So now let's say you're in cannabis. But now all of a sudden, cannabis under the growing conditions that you can create can have 4 crops a year. That's why they call it a weed, right? Okay? So now all of a sudden, I not only have 1 crop I can move, but I can move my 3rd crop in the 4th year. I can do, if your mind can take it, we can take that crop or parts of that crop, $ or not. We can say it's a fixed amount in dollars, or we can say it's a fixed amount of cannabis. And the market moves on the price of the cannabis. So you want to take the risk, or do I want to take the risk? And we negotiate it out. But all of a sudden now, instead of having 1 crop of corn a year, I got 4 crops of cannabis. All right? So each formula is different. If you're a manufacturer and you open up to a formula, you're going to take it in your mind and you're going to run it a certain way. I was talking about crypto with Blake this morning, and all of a sudden he's definancing notes because he takes it from one direction and moves it into another.
Okay, so you talked about the creation of wealth formula. Why don't you go over that if you're not talking about using like crops? Let's use more just like talk about with real property. How does the creation of wealth formula work?
Well, the easiest one is to you have a property with a $100,000 property, $50,000 mortgage, $50,000 equity. So you want to buy another property. So we agree that we'll use some of your equity to acquire that. So we agreed if the $250,000 would be fair, So we create a note against your existing property, which has got 50 against it. We now have 75 against it. And we're going to trade that 25 note as a down payment into something else for another $50,000 property. So you get the property first and you create it simultaneously. It's not done beforehand. So now you've got your $1 million property and you got a $500,000 property and you got 25,000 in a second over here and you've got a 25,000 or a $50,000 first over here. So now on this property, you could create another $25,000 note and buy a third property. If you wanted to later, you could put a blanket mortgage over 2 properties and buy a third one. So you've used that same equity for the creation of wealth formula. So now the creation of wealth formula, we transferred to agriculture, but we could also transfer it to making widgets in your machine shop. That you will trade those widgets 6 months from now for that value now. So you can make a note. We make a note based on silver. You can make a note based on anything else that you wanted. So it's a creation of wealth. You can trade me your services for the camera for $10,000 worth to buy $10,000 worth of something I have. You've created wealth on a piece of paper. It says, I actually will trade you 10 hours worth or whatever that amounts to. That's the creation of wealth. So you can create all the wealth that you want if you've got the courage to do it and the integrity to pay for what you created.
What's a seller carry and why is it a useful tool?
I'm saying, say it again.
What's a seller carry?
What's a seller carry?
Yeah, and why is it a useful tool?
It's so far back, I don't know. Jesus, I mean, that's a sales question. You're going to sell me your property for $100,000. You got 50 against it, or not? Forget. I'll put up $25,000 down, and you carry back $25,000 second on your property. There's a 50 first. You're carrying a 25 second. Your 25 second is a carryback. All it is means that you're carrying back part of your equity.
Okay, so I'll ask the last question that I ask people, and that's, do you like your job?
It just opens up the world.
He
It
just wants
does.
to- do
There's
you like your
anybody I
job?
talk to. Pardon?
Do you like your job, Bob?
I don't have a job.
Yeah. You have a lifestyle, right? Yeah.
But you can do anything you want. It just, creativity is not locked to real estate. You can take any subject you want, and the same strategies work. That it just, to me, it's just unbelievable that we go around. I'm sure we're just looking under the hem of what this thing is all really about. But you talk about freedom, and I put all 3 of my kids on boats going around the world as part of their college to try to teach them that the world was bigger than, Newport Beach where we lived. But it's nothing compared to what you can do with this, because it takes all the restrictions off your mind. You still have to come back. The last in exchange, the brainstorming, the last strategy is using good sense now to take all those ideas and build the one that works. But the freedom of being creative allows you to say anything you want. One of the authors, either Dr. Parnes or Osborne, used Limburger cheese. He would just say to a group, Limburger cheese. And that guy will think about a dairy that needs to do something. Somebody else will think about something else. It doesn't matter what you throw out. Your mind will hitchhike on that idea, and it'll create a new idea. You can't help it. Once you know how the creative mind works, you can't help but be creative. It's automatic. And it takes you totally out of mundane living, I'll tell you. Because there's nothing you can't do.